Craig City Council, Craig Business Industrial Park Workshop. It's January 14th at 5 p.m. 2025. So, Peter, are you starting this or Shannon?
Actually, Shannon's going to take the lead on
Okay, Shannon.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. So we wanted to hold this workshop as more of an informational session with council. This has been a project that's been going on for the last several years, so just wanted to give you all an update of kind of where we're at, talk about how we got here, and potential next steps for the future. So this particular site for the industrial park has actually been into consideration for quite a while now. In fact, I have a concept up in my office. It's probably from the early 2000s of a kind of a site plan. So it's been in the works and been a conversation piece for quite a while now. But I think what really spurred us to get to this point was the availability of OJT funding that had started to come down the pipeline over the last few years. As you all are probably aware, back in 2021, OJT did announce that we were going to receive about $2 million initially for the Yampa Valley to help out with economic development, job creation, property tax related projects. So with that said, we had a conversation with OJT about pursuing the industrial park as a potential project to see if that would fit within their criteria as something that we could apply for. The process is pretty complicated. It's pretty time consuming as well. So essentially what we had to do was sit down and talk to OJT and vet the project in person. We then created what we call the Northwest Colorado Development Council. I know we talk about that a little bit in some of our meetings, but essentially that's our regional organization that consists of all of our regional partners. So that's Craig, Hayden, Steamboat Springs, Meeker, Rangeley, Yampa, and Oak Creek, and then all the subsequent counties that encompass those areas. So that is the regional entity that has to approve these OJT asks before we actually go to OJT to ask for the funding. So first round, we had a little bit over $2 million that OJT had available to ask for. Peter and I had a conversation in early 2022, again, vetted the project. They said it was a fit. We then presented that to the NWCDC in May of 2022. It was approved. Originally, OJT recommended that we ask for $1 million for the acquisition of the property. They then came back to us and said, hey, we actually don't know how much money we have left, but let's double check and make sure you might have to adjust your ask. So once they confirmed that number, we were looking at closer to $720,000 that was left in that regional bucket. So we had to go back to to NWCDC and basically lower that ask to the $720,000, which was approved. Then Peter and I went back to OJT for the official ask. I know it's kind of complicated, in which we didn't get an official award until almost 2 years later for that. So a lot of things had kind of happened in the meantime. So that was in August of 2022 that we submitted our OJT application for the 720. In the meantime, we applied for the $2.5 million CDS, which is the Congressionally Directed Spending Grant. That was the $2.5 million for the horizontal public infrastructure. We also began working with Ayers Associates to put together a new conceptual drawing. We hadn't had a new concept again since the one that I have in my office from probably 20 years ago. We were able to utilize our Brownfields grant funding to have Ayers put together those new concepts. They also put together some new cost estimates for the horizontal infrastructure, so we were kind of working on that behind the scenes. So for about a year, we were diligently following up with OJT to see what the status was on our grant. We could not get a firm answer. The criteria kept changing. We kept having to submit new information to kind of to meet that. But eventually they told us we would need a purchase agreement, a letter of intent, or a formal award. And a formal award of the CDS grant funding before they could issue us a formal award notification for those dollars. So we began working on that. In the interim, there were conversations being had with the current owner of the property. Of course, he was open to sell. We were looking at close to $1 million at the time for the purchase price, or what we were willing to offer to go up to. That number's changed, obviously. We'll get to that in a minute. But we had budgeted in the 2024 industrial park line item $1 million. So we had the 720 that we were anticipating from OJT, and then the 280 from the general fund. As most of you will all recall, I think the majority of you guys were here last February when we had the joint city-county meeting where we sat down. OJT had issued a second round of funding, I think for about $2.3 million specifically for Moffett County, and then we had another shared bucket for the regional partners. So we had the joint meeting with the county where we agreed that the county would pursue $2 million for their event center, and then we would pursue the additional $331 to make up that difference for our industrial park ask. So I had to go back to NWCDC, ask for the $331, which was approved, which put us to the new total of the $1,051,000, which is where we're at now. At that time, we put together a non-binding LOI to the seller in the amount of $950. Again, just anticipating some difference there for the closing costs. At that time, the seller's original ask or his asking amount was $1.6 million. We offered $950. And that was when we were notified that a private developer had come in and offered $1.4 million on the property. We were able to find out who that developer was. Obviously, it's the Dragoos, the same folks that are working on the apartment complex, and engaged in a public-private partnership with them. We were eventually notified in August of 2024 that we did get the $2.5 million CDS grant, so we let OJT know that as well. The developer then completed an additional phase one. We had completed a phase one back in April of 2022, but they needed an updated one. So they did a phase one and a survey at their own expense last August. No issues with that phase one. And then in September of last year, we were finally given the official award from OJT for the $1,051,000. And that's kind of where we started really working with the private developer on how we're going to move forward with this acquisition, because we're still $69,000 short. So for the 2025 budget, we've got $1,331,000 budgeted in the industrial park line item. So again, we've still got that $69,000 deficit, and that's kind of the next item on the agenda, that acquisition process of the property, how we work through that, what that looks like. But I'll stop right there. You guys have any questions? I'm sure there's lots.
So just out of curiosity, when they offered 1.4, why didn't we just back away and let them do and go forward from there? Why did we come back to negotiate with them?
I think initially, understanding with the public-private partnership that we were going to have to utilize some of our dollars as an incentive either way. So with the $1,051,000 to use that for an incentive to buy it, and then the $2.5 million. In any case, we had to have ownership of the property to utilize the grant dollars. So that's where we came in and said, okay, if we're going to use the $2.5 million and the $1,051,000, city has to take ownership of the property for that time being to utilize the grant money. I don't think that's the intent for us to have ownership permanently, but to utilize the dollars, we have to have that. So that's where we kind of step back in.
So I understand having ownership of the property to qualify for these grants. Has there been conversation with the developer yet? Obviously, they were okay with maybe purchasing it for 1.4. Like, is there anything on their end where they, I guess, not credit the 1.4 back? But, you know, I could see us, the 2.5 million for the infrastructure, being low. Would they be willing to provide like the 1.4 that we're offering to acquire the property and put that into the horizontal infrastructure to help finish that potentially?
Potentially. That's not a conversation we've had,
Yeah.
but we can certainly ask.
Yeah.
They were willing to purchase it, and
Yeah.
it makes sense
Yeah.
with the grants, I get that, but.
Right.
And I think, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, the initial reasoning that they put in that offer, obviously they knew that we were intending on buying it. There was actually a third offer on the table as well. So they put in their offer as a placeholder essentially for us to eventually take ownership. So.
Okay, history, so acquisition.
So basically where we stand right now is the purchase agreement is currently between the Dragoos and the seller. So again, in order to get utilization of the OJT funds, that has to be assigned over to the city. Within the OJT agreement, they're asking that that assignment be done by the end of February, and then the purchase be completed by the end of May. We can certainly ask for an extension if we need to. That's an option. I believe currently Dragoos have their closing set for the end of July, so we have a little bit of time. But again, we're $69,000 short plus the closing costs. So we need to figure out, where that's going to come from, how that's going to be paid back, what that looks like.
We talked to Dragoos at all about, they've already had offered the 1.4 and then the drawback, just throw in the other 60,000.
Yes, that is an option. Initially, and I think we've had conversations about this previously in some of our updated reports, they were willing to put down the $69,000 to be the master developer.
Right.
I think they're still willing to do that, but of course, there might be other options that we can explore, so.
I think one of the things that came up in conversation is if we're going to have a master developer, do we need to put that out to a bid? And what does that look like? Or do we just say, no, they automatically got it? Yes, that was something that I think was brought up.
That's a question I think that they're looking to us to answer. If they're gonna probably put in close to 100,000 with closing costs, they're hoping that puts them in a position to perform that function as an experienced developer for a project like that.
I think,
Maybe it's better for us to just put in that money and then be able to go through the process that we would normally go through, or, I mean,
Legally, I don't know, what are the kickbacks if we don't? I put out an RFP,
yeah.
I guess, would be the question.
Yeah, we'd probably put out an RFQ just to get
Right.
qualifications to see that they had the kind of qualifications necessary. Probably wouldn't ask for necessarily bids, maybe estimates of what that would take. We don't have a defined role of what the master developer is doing at this point. I mean, that's further conversation that they've told us what they've done on their current project, and I think they have some expectations it would follow maybe that course of progress in terms of developing the site, working directly with the city. Our objective in terms of ownership is not to take that off of the tax rolls any longer than we have to. We'd like to put it back on as quickly as possible. I mean, you've developed a project, and I know you'd like to get those sold as quickly as you can. But we also don't want to have the job of a developer. We don't want to be in a position to have that languishing while somebody has an idea of how it should be developed.
that was the biggest item for me. We didn't want the city to be the developer of this property. And there's a lot of good things about this property, and rail spur right there. Part of Mountain Rail is they're looking for a fueling and depot, at the end of the line, which we are.
Maintenance shop both.
And maintenance shops, that's something we haven't talked about yet, but the calls I've been on with CDOT and consultants, that's what they want. So I don't know if we have to upgrade that to bring it there, but that'd be a great place to include it on one of the big anchors for that, industrial park. There's so many possibilities there, and more than anything else, I didn't want Peter and Shannon to be the developers of this property, and that was my question: do we have to go on an RFP?
Yeah, I think that's a question we don't quite have the answer to, but
Right.
as a master developer, I don't think the developer we're talking to also doesn't want to be the person that defines what that property is going to be. They want to have lots of public outreach meetings, they want council input to determine what the best fit is for the city of Craig before they start putting their expertise into the project and start pursuing grant funding and that sort of thing. And
I mean, what is the vision exactly of the whole thing? I mean, so there's no vision, it's just simply buy it and then we get community input?
well, it depends on whose vision you want.
I want a vision.
Okay. If we look at what they've done in Montrose, they have built kind of a business industrial park that has a flex, long building, that has a flex square footage, and people can come in and purchase what they need, and they'll flex the division of that building. And that turns out to be a fairly cost-effective approach. We want property tax, we want employees in those areas. Part of the project could be dedicated to, well, we've had a couple of small manufacturing companies look at us in the past couple of years, and I think they have also talked about recreational manufacturing because of the river project and our outdoor recreation opportunities in this area, just like Montrose. I mean, that's something that they thrive in, and they have been on recruitment trips and have talked to some of our neighbors' businesses, which may or may not be made them happy, but I think it's getting difficult for some of those companies to work in a really high-priced environment to keep their employees. So we would have to further define that, though, Luke. We don't have a,
Well, and like, what are we on the hook for down the road? How much more money are they gonna continue to reach? I mean, I'm assuming that they're gonna keep reaching out to us for more,
you're talking about like infrastructure development?
all of the above.
Well, I think our thoughts, and I want to jump in here. I'll let you take that
Yeah,
one.
I think it's hard to say at this point. I mean, we had talked about, I mean, obviously, we're gonna pursue additional grants, and that was part of some of the OJT funding. You know, we have to go after additional state and federal grants. We have talked to the EDA about, they've helped out with the industrial park in Hayden, they've helped out with our Whitewater Park. It's pretty common for them to do bigger, larger scale projects like this, so that's certainly an option. Another good thing about, obviously, them is one of their staff is a grant writer, so obviously, I think from our position, we would like to pursue as many grants that we can take on as possible, but I wouldn't say it's out of the question that they could come back and ask for additional incentives.
So what is the advantage of the city owning the property?
We have the grant funding to purchase it.
We have 3.5 million in grant.
What's that?
We have 3.5 million in grant money that goes to this project.
Because we can't do the infrastructure or get that infrastructure grant unless they own it, correct?
Right.
So that was kind of a thought, that obviously if they were willing to come to the table originally with 1.4, find a way to
Get that one.
get that 1.4 back, because
Well, who is the third
if
developer?
because the train station, right, the train depot.
Right.
That's, the CDOT basically said that's on the community,
Right.
right?
They want that. They didn't say it's gonna happen. That's our job.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's the
But so
community to
that's what
develop.
I'm
They'll give us
thinking,
a
like, if we can
platform.
find a way,
Yeah.
whether it's the Draguza, the developer, whoever the developer is, that was willing to buy this land, find a way to recoup that 1.4, turn around and either put that into extending infrastructure if needed, or finding a way to use that 1.4 to build
Planning.
this
Yeah.
train depot, and then now we let the state know that we're serious about this. and then now they get it extended. Because I just feel like if we're not serious about the train depot or whatever, I know it's two different subjects.
That's
but-
only an option. That's
Right,
not-
you know what I'm saying, but they might not extend it for 5 or 7 more years.
Right.
So we, I mean, if we're interested in Depot, why wouldn't we buy the property down off of Yampa? Like, I mean, wouldn't
Correct,
that-
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
would think.
question
that would
I
have to
asked
be
too.
part of-
I mean, wouldn't that be
We
the
could
place
use
to buy rather than?
deal.
OJT funding for that, but
Down where?
just where Ayers have
Yampa.
done the conceptual design already off of Yampa,
Brownstone Development.
4th and Yampa.
Yeah, the actual.
Well, they could go there, you know, I'm just saying, or, you know, we'll have lots available there. That may be an option. You know, I think the important part is, it said that the developers, if it is the Dragoos, they want community input to what this is gonna look like. So they're gonna come up and we're gonna hold some groups and get community input. But then, you know, that's their job to go out and help recruit businesses to this. And yes, businesses are gonna ask for incentives, okay? But it'll be our job, what are you bringing to the table? What's your valuation? What are you adding in jobs and sales tax? And we will consider each one on a case-by-case basis, I'm sure. So that's how the world of economic development works out there, guys. You know, we've been selling clean air and sunshine since I've been here in the elk hunting capital of the world. Okay?
And
So-
I think that's just what my concern is we're
Yep.
already bringing 3.8 to the table. You know,
Yep.
are they gonna come back and say, well, to get this business, you need to offer these guys this, and, you know, what's the snowball look like
Right.
at the end of
The
the
long term.
Yeah.
And like I said, whoever's on council when that happens, hopefully they weigh, it's gonna create X amount of jobs, it's gonna add X amount to the city sales tax, and then we're gonna be that much property tax valuation. Say they build a new hotel, that's probably not the best place for it. That's what they're building in Montrose, 2 hotel chains.
Yeah.
And, you know, what that adds in sales tax and property valuation, that's a choice council's gonna have to make if they're gonna allow incentives. But I'm sure they're gonna ask for incentives. So, not the developers, but the people willing to locate are gonna ask for certain incentives.
And that's maybe a question for the developer, the master developer, is providing the infrastructure and potentially the services to the sites. Is that enough incentive?
Yeah. I mean, I just don't want to be going 15 years property tax. I
For
mean,
each one.
for every person that comes to town, that doesn't help us on property tax. You know,
So,
No, and I think that's a good point. I mean, once the infrastructure's in, the streets, I mean, that's pretty darn good
I feel like that's,
incentive.
Well, then there's
Again,
paving.
We're not Hayden, but if you look at what Hayden's done with their business park, they did the infrastructure, they're doing the road. They're not giving incentives for the actual businesses that are
that's
in
what I
there.
mean, is I just, where's the line? What I worry about is,
Are you sure they're not?
Talking to Matt last night, he said no. I asked him, and he said no.
Good.
So that doesn't mean no, but that's what he said.
you know, the incentive to them, I think, is being so close to the airport.
Right,
Right.
with the airport right
Incentive
there.
of being in Craig-Moffat County is cost of doing business,
Right.
in a way,
Right.
and potentially.
Either that or there's something here that they can use in their manufacturing. Yep. So, they're not asking for incentives yet, but like I said, don't be surprised down the road, some developer's gonna, or some business will say, what can you help me with?
Right, but I think you look at it, again,
Yeah.
it's going back to looking at it as piece by piece. If someone like Bad Distillery comes and develops and comes in and asks, you look at it, what are they gonna do for you?
Right.
Is it worth doing versus what, that's the reason why I like the doing one at a time instead of coming up with an en masse, this is what we'll do for everybody.
Right.
Well, and then that gets to the point that we need to be, and future councils need to be careful about is, if you're located in this park, you're eligible for this incentive, but if you're
Right.
located outside of the park, is it the same playing field? You know,
Right.
Who was the third offer on the property?
I don't know who that third offer was.
Just,
So how do you see the community planning and visioning
yeah.
go?
Well, I'm not sure exactly yet. I mean, we've done a couple of different things with like, when we did, like the housing stuff, we had the steering committees, we had people coming here and doing visioning plans. When we did the Brownfields grant, like for South Yampa, we had public outreach at Center of Craig, we had people coming there. Again, like decent attendance, not the best, so I think we need to really ramp that up to see if we want good, legitimate public engagement. I mean, obviously, that's gonna take a little bit longer of a process, but I think Dragoo's, take on that is, we don't want another situation with the housing. We want to come in and have like real public input from people and not just look like we're coming in and saying, this is what we're going to do. Of course, it has to make sense. Market study probably has to happen at some point as well. Like, people can't just say, hey, we want 50 casinos over there, and, that's what we go with. But I think it's going to have to be a well thought out process, and I'd be curious to see what they've done in the past, because in my understanding in Montrose, they've had kind of two different developments, one with the public input and one without, and it seems the one with the public input garnered a much bigger success rate. So I'm not exactly sure to answer your question, but I think we have some ideas we can work with.
I mean, it's just a different type of property than the one in Montrose. I mean, that would be like buying Billy Mack's property and developing along the riverfront. And, I mean, I'm just trying to picture it. I mean, it would be pretty industrial, I'd imagine, right behind all this stuff.
Right.
Right.
That's kind of.
I see that more as a
Yeah, I mean, it's-
manufacturing, whereas
yeah.
Montrose is not, it's
I mean, it's-
manufacturing, but not really.
No,
It's more
no,
retail.
it can be anything there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hotels, that makes sense. I mean, they're not gonna put a hotel on this
Right.
piece of ground.
But basically, their take was, after they get that vision planning, they can take that back and draft a site plan and kind of go from there.
Did they indicate, or we heard at some point, it sounds like they may already have a few potential businesses that may be interested, so maybe that's a starting point at least, or is that not the case?
I think they have been on some recruiting efforts, and they've kind of softened that until they get this deal put together.
You said we've spent money with Ayers already on conceptual.
Mm-hmm.
Have we seen that conceptual design? Or has the developer seen that? Are they kind of in line?
I don't know if we've sent that to them or not. It's mostly when we had to apply for the grants, we had to put together like the lot lines and all that stuff, and kind of where, if we phased in and out, like if we had to do it in a couple phases, where the infrastructure would go. But I mean, I have them. It's not anything just super concrete, but I mean, I'm happy to share that with you guys. And
Just looking at what they did in Montrose, I think the Ayers plan has too much fluff in it.
yeah, it's got a lot of green
They're
space
looking
and
to
stuff.
streamline it, cut the expense out of it. That's how I see what they've done in Montrose.
But it still looks nice down there because,
No.
I mean, I've been down there
Yeah.
a bunch, and it doesn't look industrial. And it does have landscaping, and it does have grass and things about it.
You probably don't have roads that wind through.
No,
the-
you don't have roads.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
There's roads and curbs and gutters
Yeah.
in
Right.
Montrose, and landscaping on the entrance, and
Right.
so,
Yeah,
And their
it looks
headquarters
nice.
is part of that too, so.
yeah.
Like Beverly Hills.
Is there thoughts on if we own the land and we sell the land to the business, do we recoup that money from the sale?
Well, I would think that we certainly should recoup a portion of it, unless that turns out to be an incentive.
So how, if we sold it, because like you described the Montrose, it's basically a long building that you can move. Do you sell that to the person who built that long building that you can move it, or are you selling each individual piece?
Well, the community may come back and say, you guys may say something different, and they'll come up with a different concept.
Right.
But that's what they've done.
That's, yeah.
So we own the land, and then the developer comes in and owns the building? Or is that,
I would assume.
How does that work?
Yeah, who owns the building? Or buildings?
yeah, what, you don't
If they,
know.
I mean, if someone comes in and purchases this part of that
Yeah,
property
they buy a
and does their
lot.
own building, buys a lot, that's one thing versus the developer coming in and,
Yeah, what, how does it look? That's,
Right.
so they have a lot and they have a business. Who owns that building, who owns
Mhm.
the land.
the land and that
Yeah.
stuff?
That's where it may necessitate partitioning that, parceling that property up and so,
And selling it
like each
piece by piece.
business owner would do his own thing,
Yeah.
or her own thing.
And that way we'd start getting property tax back.
Well, I mean, is that the vision? That's the point we're not gonna own that property or we
Exactly.
continue? Yeah, that's,
We don't want to,
Okay.
we don't want to manage a park.
okay.
As Soon as they buy it,
It's
goes
theirs.
on the tax
So we,
rolls.
we should get some money back for that, for the ground itself?
We should.
We should.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I think that's I think those negotiations have to happen to
Right.
see, get deeper into the secret sauce here of how they envision putting that together.
And remember, we're not making any decisions now. This is introductory information only. Come up with your questions so we can find some answers from the developer. Question we had in our pre-meeting is responsibilities of the city and the developer. What are they? The question, what are they gonna want from the city? You know, so,
And then how does the master developer make, like, what, why is
Who-
that?
how do they make money?
What's
Yeah,
their,
yeah, because,
what's their
Right.
reason of wanting to be the master?
Correct.
developer? They gotta recoup money somehow for,
that's
uh,
why they're in business.
Yeah, doing all that stuff.
So,
What risks do we have owning the property? I don't know. I mean,
What
do we
risk?
leave the community on the hook for what? That's all, I mean,
well, and the discussion was also if we have a master developer, what happens if that park doesn't fill up in 5 or 6 years and they say, well, we're done, we're out of here. Now we're just left with, the infrastructure's in, we still have to maintain it, but I guess what's
it might
the,
take 20 years to
Yeah.
do it.
what kind of language can we have that makes sure that they're hitting these milestones? And if they're not, then what's
Staying
the,
on track.
what's the
Penalty or whatever.
Penalty.
Yeah.
performance standards?
Yeah.
principal's office?
So the Hayden concept, someone came in and purchased that land for that business
They're
development.
selling lots.
And
Selling
then
lots.
really all the town of Hayden has done there is get the infrastructure.
All the infrastructure, they're doing the roads, they're doing the water, sewer, electric, all that's town of Hayden to the properties. And then that developer has sold them off. And I haven't verified, because I was gonna ask Matt on that too, but Kevin Booth was telling me this morning that they've sold off like 75% of it already.
I mean, would,
Yeah.
What a
that,
great
Dragoos
location.
aren't interested in something like that where we take care of infrastructure rather than, or no?
That's kind of what we're doing.
Like if they
Well,
buy,
that's-
no, I'm saying if they buy it, just like,
Oh,
But then
What
we don't
happened
get
in
the
Hayden?
grant, but then we don't have the grant to pay for the
Yeah.
infrastructure, we have to pay for the infrastructure.
not
the problem.
necessarily.
We have part of the funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, they,
It would have to phase in.
yeah.
How much did Hayden get, like 8 million
Yeah.
EDA?
8 million, 8 or 8.5, something like that.
And they got 900,000 from OJT as well.
I
Who
got
did they
it.
get the 8 million?
8 million.
The
didn't they?
EDA.
From, yeah,
Yeah.
EDA grant.
And there would be more grants coming, because that's part of their commitment so far has been, we'll do the grant work. Heidi, David DeGrew's wife, she's the one that did some of the grant work for some of the money we've already received. So,
Back to the RFP, who, is that like I guess Alex Gano's our housing attorney, right? But is that a Heather question or a
Put it out.
specialized attorney?
If we need to put it out to RFP or RFQ, if we didn't
RFQ.
select Dragoos.
So, you know, I think the appearance is bad if you just unilaterally select them, is what I would say. Whether or not it's legal is probably a different question. But just on its face, I don't know, and, you know, happy to look further into it, but I think just the appearance may cause some backlash.
you think the Dragoos would be problems with that, or
Well, yeah, I think so.
no? So,
If it's a public
What do they
private
expect
partnership
it?
agreement, where they have invested in that facility but don't have.
well, that's gonna be one of the requirements. They're gonna have to invest.
Right, that's why.
What are you willing to invest in this?
Is a different question.
Currently, all we've heard is maybe investing the 69,000.
Right.
Well, you don't tell the rest of them, but what will you invest?
I just don't want them to get the impression that if they pay the 69,000, then they get full access.
Well, plus closing costs, so 100,
But
Yeah.
if they pay 100,000, then they're guaranteed the,
right.
you know.
What does an RFP look like? What do we ask, I mean, what are we asking for when we do that?
Probably, I would think.
Saying
Master
Master
developer,
developer and
I mean, it's a
questions.
resume, or?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, based on.
that's yet to be written.
RCA
Yeah.
RFQ we did, it was a series of questions that came up that the Steamboat lawyer put together, and then they put it out to bid to,
And we
we
just-
got.
And there's really no
answered
money
the
involved
question,
except for
pretty
this
much.
possible,
There wasn't, other than the lawyer's time to put it together, there wasn't really any money involved, no.
We had to do the same thing on the 8th Street kinda, cause we didn't have anything that could be bid on yet, but we kinda had to, in order to get the grant, the stuff all coordinated, you had to have somebody on board ahead of time, and so we had an RFQ for that.
We're looking for them to come up with a concept for the park based on our input. We're looking for them to recruit businesses to the park. That's where their expertise is, and they're really good at it. And fill it up and sell it off and
I mean,
lease.
but that's not gonna
lease
be
it.
on Shannon.
Huh?
That's
No.
not gonna be on
That should
Shannon to
not be on
recruit,
Shannon.
yeah.
That
We
should be
don't
on
want to
developer.
do,
No,
we don't want to manage a park,
Right.
we don't want to sell parcels or that sort of thing. But we do have, as a partner, we're going to have, just like the Meadowwood project, we're going to have some input into the design, the site plan, what the concept looks like. And Marlon will be involved, of course, from a land use standpoint.
But that's all written in the
Yeah.
RFQ,
And
so.
And then who gets financially compensated? and
Who gets paid first?
Yes.
Right, that's the question.
Or is it a percentage of the sale, you know?
Not quite sure how that looks.
So I guess my question is this, if we purchase the land, we come up with the additional $100,000 or whatever, and the city purchases the land, so we can definitely benefit from the grant funding, then at that point, can we basically get out of it and sell it to a developer or someone who wants to come in and do that master planning, or is that not something that could happen right away?
Talking about just selling the property?
Right, selling the whole
Like,
land.
get the infrastructure in there, now we've utilized the grant funding
And
for
just
that
sell lots.
purpose.
Get out and just sell it.
And then, yeah. I
Be
mean,
happy to do that.
That would be ideal, but you have to check with the grant and see,
Right.
see what their
How long
requirements
does
were.
he would have to own it for, and requirements like that.
Love to see a developer come in and buy one big chunk.
We talked to OJT and said our intent is not to own this property, and we're looking to sell it off piece by piece.
Yeah, it's not any different, is it?
Or sell, yeah, or sell the entire park.
Yeah,
Mhm.
do it in mass.
I just think we have a good opportunity right now because there are so many developers in this area, you know, in Routt County doing all kinds of work. And so, I mean, maybe it makes sense to at least have the opportunity to put it out there and see if there are other developers. But, I mean, I just feel like this is a great time because there's so much building going on and so many people already kind of in this area. So, I'm sure, I mean, that's not always the case, but I think
Right.
it's kind of a bonus right now.
So you think we should market it right up front?
I
What
would
the-
say, how long does the city have to own it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
Really?
that's what I don't want us to be, and I don't want us to own it for 20 years.
No,
Right.
no,
Well, like, we want it to be on our tax rolls.
Right.
So
Let's get
I
it back
think
on.
that happens right
that's the other thing, the sooner we
I
dump
mean,
it.
you haven't
it's
seen
back up.
stipulations on the grants that say we have to hold it for,
I need to check probably the CDS grant. I think OJT is probably flexible, but I need to, since it's a federal grant.
Well, that OJT grant was specific in terms of its use. Whoever purchased it certainly have to fulfill the uses that we're hoping to achieve in terms of property tax, employment.
Standards or whatever.
Yes. That's built into some of the language in the grant.
And so maybe that deters
we will-
people from even looking
Yeah.
at it, but I'm just curious, like, what does that look like as far as how?
And in
soon-
theory, we will still own the easement of the road, the infrastructure,
Right.
because we're not selling that
They'll
off.
they'll dedicate, that'll get
That'll get
dedicated back to the
dedicated,
city.
right?
Yeah.
But I guess if we own the land, we'll dedicate it back to ourselves. So I would think that would maybe be like, I don't want to say a loophole, but
The grant Shannon's talking about is that $2.5 million grant. And they usually require, well, actually, yeah. I guess we'll just have to look into that.
Yeah, we'll need to
grant.
look
Yeah,
at that one.
'cause
Yeah, I think, yeah,
congressionally-
we need to at least know the strings.
Yeah, CDS grants and their requirements are different than EDS or others, both good and bad. Because like with the 500,000 we got for that for the chamber, there's no strings, there's no nothing tied to that. So you got the one that Steamboat got, and I don't remember what it was for, it was very restricted.
Yeah.
Well, the CDS grant that we have now, half of it's going to 8th Street. Half of it's slated to go for infrastructure at Meadowwood that'll get dedicated back to us.
Right.
We still own it if it's dedicated back to us.
Right.
Yeah.
This is Amy at Honey Rock, South.
that's not a bad, I like that idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice, it's
Gives us
possible,
options
particularly
anyway.
developers around now, if that's possible.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Because I was just thinking of the gentleman that applied for the business grant program that we had, that had that concept of the greenhouses, and I mean, I just feel like there's always
Yeah.
people out there looking for some land. And not that that's a fit for him necessarily, but I'm just thinking, you know, if you can turn that around fairly quickly and sell it and get back on the tax rolls, I think that's the right idea.
If the developer owns the land, they will be more ambitious to develop it versus if we own it and we have some kind of unless we have a performance-based contract with the developer, they
Well,
can just.
and with a master developer, if we get a master developer and then sell it, I'm confused by that. I mean, do we sell it before you go looking for the master
I think you
developer
would
then?
just sell it, but then if we didn't sell it and we did have a master developer, what's the incentive for them to?
Right, to push
develop
through it,
quickly, since we're owning.
owning it all.
So either you put it on the market and you sell it
Right.
competitively, or you
Ye-
have an RFP or RFQ.
Right, with a master, come in with a master developer with incentives, timeframes wise.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how we acquired it initially, if the price doesn't change.
Yeah. You still got the 69,000.
Well, less closing
What's closing costs on a project like that, roughly?
costs. At least 30 probably.
Yeah, I would think.
So we're looking at 100,000,
100,000 total.
which we would control our.
Information only. Is there other questions? Shannon's been jotting them down. What else? Concepts or?
I just think from my standpoint, understanding the restrictions or what comes with these grants up front would be very helpful, because I think that's what I've gotten in trouble in the past with, is you don't realize the strings until you're in the middle of it.
In
and
the
you're
middle
like,
of it.
Well, now we can't sell it to you, so.
Yeah.
Some of them, you don't even get the money until certain, you know what I mean, something's developed to a certain point, so it's kind of hard to.
Just so you qualify for the grant, if you don't meet the standards, you don't get the money, so, you know, so I guess if you don't want the strings, don't get the grant. I mean, don't take the money. You don't like the strings that.
Yeah, but we can
Well,
talk
that-
about
that-
and
just
see
knowing
if
what the strings are.
what the strings are, and then
So we can make
decide
the
at that
decision.
point.
Then we make a decision.
Yeah, well,
Right.
you learn in the requirements to take the money, to
Right.
get the money. Yeah.
Right, but we've asked.
Applying for the grant's only the first step. The actual reporting and the requirements are 5 times more.
Right.
Yeah.
Takes all the time.
Yeah. People think the grant writer is the hardest part. Yeah.
Sometimes the grant's not worth, by the
Yeah.
end of the
Amount of
day,
time follow up.
it's like, oh, we
Yeah.
got $1 million worse off.
Correct.
So,
Well, the grant we have through HUD for this project is strictly for infrastructure, which we have to own. It'll be streets and pipes. Well, basically pipes, but streets, curb
we don't have to
curb
own
gutter.
the land.
No, but we have
Right.
to help.
We don't
So
have
that
to own
makes
the
sense.
land.
I like that.
Yeah.
And that's what they would buy, is the lot inside the curb line
Right,
That's right.
to the next lot line.
right.
So we can just run a main down and then they can tap in? Can we do that?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would think,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, if we put
That's the
a,
only, we own the infrastructure we would.
we put 300 foot of street, a straight street in, and we have 6 lots on that right side, and each one's 2 acres each, and, and we have taps in there for each one of those, yeah.
She's getting to the point to know what, you still have to have a pretty good
So if you have a
detailed plan of
conceptual
knowing what
plan.
that is, you know, and what's, so that you don't go, oh, shoot, we should have.
You don't know where to put the taps in until somebody might want a couple lots,
Well, yeah, I'm not giving
Then they
details,
come-
I'm
Then they
just,
come pay a tap fee and
you know, for 3 taps.
put a tap in.
Yeah, that's not.
I think there's some good questions on the table.
Mm-hmm.
what do you think next steps are for Shannon to come back? Want to do another workshop?
I would
or-
think next steps, yeah, workshop, I'd like to find out about the RFQ process. And then on
The requirements of the grants.
the requirements of the grants, if we have to own the whole park or just the,
And I don't know how you find out, but how does the developer, the master developer, make money off of this?
Well, the OJT grant is the one we're buying the ground with, pretty much.
Right,
So the infrastructure grant, I think we know the answer there, as long as we own it.
so we use the OJT to buy it and then potentially turn around and put it on the market.
right,
Yeah.
yep. And possibility.
The OJT, the city, and the master
Junior
developer.
was asking 240,000.
That's who buys the ground.
He's getting 1.4 million now for. I mean,
There's 3 people looking at it.
he has 3 people looking at
Yeah,
it.
that's what that's what happens.
It's been listening to meetings.
And then, Peter, I know you also had mentioned, so our process for public input, we just need to make sure that we're, you know, it's not us assuming that we've put this out there and people are gonna show up. I think it's
Right.
really us being very, you know,
Specific
aggressive
somehow.
or interactive or whatever the word is, and saying, we want you to be part of this process, and we don't want you 2 years from now to say, well, we didn't know that was happening, why didn't you tell us? Like, so I think, it sounded
I
like
think-
you had been to a conference or something where it sounded like maybe Rifle had done
Well-
some things, and I just would like to, like, what's
Well,
that process gonna look
And
like?
I think what we do, and I'll talk about more of this, with the RTA, the Bill, basically is gonna do a process. He's doing a community, 3 months of hitting the community hard with stakeholder meetings and all that type of thing. So we follow and look at, see what he did, to get people involved. That's, again, we're having another meeting to talk to him about it, but that's the reason why the RTA hired them. So if we can learn from what works and what doesn't, just by watching what he does.
But we don't want input on whether we buy the land or not.
I don't know. It's fine.
I think the decision, the community input is what do they want to see there? Are we asking if they want an industrial park at all? I don't know. I see the process just like we did on the brownfield, the conceptual designs we had for downtown and South Yampa and, you know, several sessions like that.
Those were great, but you had 2 or 3 people show up.
Well, that's the problem when you ask for input.
Right.
So until you move to the next step, then you get a whole bunch.
But I think I like the way that it was kind of guided, like they
Right.
came with some already like pre-ideas, you know, hotels
Mm-hmm.
downtown or like a concert venue or
Right.
whatever.
Choices.
Something, yeah, and then
Right.
of course we had the options, so maybe if we can kind of, well, I don't want to steer anybody to make a decision, but I like the approach that they had. But you're right, we got to figure out a way to really amp that up and market it to
People
people
to
that
show
get it.
up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think what Andrew is talking, I was talking to you, I think, about the bond issue that was sold in Rangeley for a $38 million hospital that was gonna raise everybody's property taxes by 40%. And I thought, that's never gonna pass. And they showed up at every single event with a booth, and they had lots of interaction because you're surrounded by 200 people already at the event, you know, and it doesn't take a whole lot for them to come up, grab a pamphlet or have a conversation. And that was the kind of, I don't know how much time we have to determine, you know, if we should purchase the land. But if that's a question.
Because of what?
What's that?
Why?
Well, I mean, if that's a question we need to get answered, that's gonna have to start like ex post haste here.
I mean, because you're worried about the land being bought?
Well, because the grants have timelines and are benefit from the use of those funds and everything, you know, people just aren't gonna wait a year for us to come up with an answer whether we pull the trigger on that or not, but it would have to
So
start pretty quick.
I wasn't aware we would ask the input if we want an industrial park on that 25 acres. I think that's why we're empowered, we're elected to make some of these decisions. We were asking the community input, what would you like to see in this park? You know, some design concepts or uses, or what type of businesses you would like to see.
But are we putting the cart in front of the horse? Like, do we need to figure out first the restrictions within the grants?
Definitely.
And then.
That's the low-hanging fruit here. Yeah.
Which grant and which restrictions are you referring to?
If we buy the land and sell it immediately, if we buy the land and develop it, like, what does all that look like?
So
The
tied in
questions
with-
that
with
we've
the-
already
the
asked
2.5
Shannon to get the
million.
answers for.
Yeah, the 2.5 is already, that's an easy one. It's infrastructure. That's all it's gonna pay for.
OJT
We
will
have to
help.
own it. The OJT grant for $1,051,000, we can sell the property, but it's gonna have to, we're gonna have to ensure that it's for the purpose that's stated in the grant. They've already said we can parse it up, we can partition it, and sell it off piece by piece, but it's for the purpose of a business park to enhance employment and property tax.
So the HUD grant, CDS, basically we're gonna own it, so there aren't any restrictions anyway, really. I mean, we're gonna have streets, we're gonna have pipes, water lines, that's what we're gonna do, and we're gonna own
Once
it.
we have a site plan. And
Yeah,
Once we have input from the citizens as to what they think should be there.
right.
How much rail should be there. And then the design's that's gonna take a year and a half for
least,
that piece
yeah.
to come around. I can't think of a major project we've done that hasn't taken 3 to 4 years to complete.
Yep.
So the deadline or the pressure is in buying the property.
Yep.
Right now, it's February 28th. We can probably move that date out if we had to. Make a decision as to when we have till May to execute the purchase.
I guess one last question then, if we did need to come up with additional funding, is there money that you, like, is there, you know, I know when we purchased that property at Woodbury Park, that 6 acres, you know, there was some money in a specific fund. I mean, is there anything like that that we're looking at that could potentially be used for that, or no? Is that like a conservation fund? Is that what that was? for the Woodbury?
Conservation
Yeah,
Trust
I
Fund.
mean, I'm just saying, for example, is there something?
If it's outdoor recreation, if we're putting a trail through there or something like that, yes.
Okay.
CTF funds could be applied to that. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on where else that money could come from?
Just right now, the 3.5 million. plus the 280,000 the city has committed. But yes, the EDA, Shannon talked about the EDA grants and in terms of completing the park. Once we have a full concept and
Right, but we just
But
have to get a
for-
purchase, right?
For
we just
purchasing
have
the
to-
industrial park, is there places, or are we gonna be pulling from the general fund for that? Where does that last piece come from?
69.
The 69,000?
oh, the 69.
69 that we're short.
So it sounds like maybe the direction would be to purchase it outright.
Yeah,
And not
that's
have the
not-
developer put
not-
in the
right.
70,000.
Is that a possibility at this point and still make the deadlines?
Yeah, I mean,
You have 22 million in reserve, so I think we could front that money up front with,
Shannon and I actually asked the property if she was at the offer, closing costs with exactly what we have purchased today. So she has asked that question.
any other questions you want Shannon to jot down?
If we have questions
Bring them up to her.
within the next week, though, do we
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
email Shannon?
Email Shannon and Peter so that Peter is in the loop and get answers hopefully. Because again, no decision is being made tonight or just information. But just one thing I'm unsure of, are we questioning purchasing the property? Or the concept of the creating a business park?
I'm not questioning the concept of the business park, because I think it can be successful at some point. I'm just questioning is the purchase price and how do we come up with that offset of the 100,000 to where we can almost control our destiny.
Skin in the game, I like that.
What, like, I guess what happens, like you said, the cart before the horse, what if we have a vision, a community meeting, and they say, we don't want an industrial park?
I'd be surprised.
I know, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying, playing devil's advocate, like,
Yeah.
we already have,
I'd like to know the strings attached. That's all that I'm worried about.
Right, from the,
Yeah, I mean,
Grants.
I want us to have options. I don't want us to get in a situation where they're saying you cannot sell this property because of,
Something.
I mean, I want us to, yeah, I don't want us to get in a situation that,
and we don't want to be in the situation where these companies come in and say, well, we need this many year tax exemption. Like, we just say, look, we've already got, you buy the land, we've got the
Done the
infrastructure in,
infrastructure.
we're done. If you like it, great, if not. But I hate the idea of them coming back and asking for more. And more.
case by case basis, folks. That's how I see it.
You look at it and talk about it.
Right, but if we don't own it, then it's like,
Yeah, it's not our
they
problem.
can still come back to us, but we can easily.
That's not our problem if we don't.
for the grant.
so you, I mean, you're kind of thinking a developer might come and purchase a property just because there's infrastructure there.
Mhm. That's what I would hope for.
You know, people that, as if I wanted to
What would
build
the
a
value-
subdivision, a lot of the times I say, I don't want to go do that because I have to go put $3 million worth of road in asphalt, and then I dedicate it back to the city. If that's already in, and the developer is just buying the land, that's more attractive, and I'm sure it would be attractive, you know, you had to put a sewer main in, but how nice would it have been if you didn't have to put a sewer main in? Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's your biggest expense by
Mhm.
far.
So if there's,
That would be written in the RFP.
if there's pipes and asphalt on the ground, it's a lot more attractive.
Right. And that would be, yeah.
Jen and Peter, you good?
Yeah.
Next steps?
Yeah.
Anything else? It's almost 6. We'll break. That good?